to a point, it's like, how much do you hold on to this friendship until you're like, okay, they don't actually value you as a friend?
Yeah. Relationships is one of those big questions that
It's a hard one.
it's a hard one, yeah. Hello, I'm Sam.
And I'm Amelia.
Welcome back to S3E16 podcast where we aim to build a better mindset for better relationships.
Yeah, this week we are talking about better mindsets. So what are we talking about?
So today's episode is actually a question that I thought about a while ago, and it's about, have we ever faced a moment where giving up was the easiest option?
Do you mean like thinking about if giving up is the easier option?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. We're all humans. We live through life. We are faced with challenges every day or quite often. And we're crossed with these moments where you just have to think about, is it worth it? Is it not? Should I be giving up or should I keep persisting? I think that's one big part of life.
Yeah.
But before we start, I think it would be good to lay out some common reasons for people to give up. What are some that you think would lead you into thinking that you should give up, or some reasons why people would give up?
There's going to be a fair few, but we'll list out some that are more obvious.
Giving up is actually quite broad if you really think about it, and it really depends on the situation, the timing, like what the scenario is relating to. So there are a broad spectrum of them, and it's hard to give like a definite answer of like why this person or why you would give up. So yeah.
Something got stuck in my throat.
Yeah. Okay, you start.
So I guess the most obvious one is a lack of discipline. That's probably the biggest one that a lot of people sort of face, and they go, fuck this, I'm not going to keep going.
Or even before they start, they see how hard it could be without even trying. They're like, nah, I can't be bothered.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think a common one for myself, or even a lot of people that I see with the peers, is a lack of belief. So either belief in that this thing could be true, or believe in yourself that you could be able to achieve whatever task or situation that you can go through.
Yeah, it could be a lack of confidence, especially if it's in an unknown, uncharted territory. It would make you feel a bit scared.
Yeah. But the other thing that's really common with me is I could go in with full confidence and like full belief that I can do it, even if I don't know how to do this. And then over time, as I'm doing it, my belief in myself starts to go downhill. And I'm like, okay, maybe I didn't think about this through hard enough, or I just thought too highly of myself and I start to self-doubt myself. I think that's more common than me starting with a lack of self-belief. It's like it happens over time. I'm like, what did I just put myself through?
Yeah, and this overlaps to the lack of experience. I guess the results of knowing or experiencing something that you're trying to do or want to do is just not clear.
So that kind of links off with the first one that we were saying, like you're looking at the task or the opportunity and without even trying, you're like, oh, nah, it's too hard. And that also links into you overthink the outcome. You're like, oh, but if I don't do this good, this is going to happen. Or if I do it this way, this is going to happen. Or if I did this, people are going to laugh at me. So it's this overthinking the future. Overthinking
also links to distractions too, because you might get distracted, procrastinate when it comes to your goal. And it's just kind of like, you're sitting on a train track, but then you're thinking about food and you're like, oh, I'm hungry, I want to go get out, do this and that, hang out with friends and stuff like that. And you're not focused on what your true goals are. And it's distracting you with all these, your real purpose.
Yeah. And then not having a proper plan. So you might have like this grand idea that you want to achieve a specific opportunity or task, but you didn't actually go with a plan and doing enough research to know that this is what may happen, or I need to know this before I can start this task. And you go into it just a blank canvas, which sometimes it's a good thing, but sometimes when it gets too difficult, you didn't really have a plan, you didn't anticipate the contingency plans and what can happen or what you need to know, then it makes it harder for you to achieve, and that results in you giving up.
Talking about plans, I think this one definitely links to this, is the comfort zone. You're definitely too used to the comfort zone. You're in your safe place. You know what your environment is. You know what the daily routine is. You're not willing to step out of that and try something new, something fresh, something totally out of mind, out of sight. And I'm definitely guilty of this too.
Yeah. So as you can see, there's many points, many reasons on why someone would give up. And I think the list goes on. But do you have any personal stories where there were moments where you either gave up or you persisted through?
For sure, I think my whole life has been this whole challenge, but something that I was thinking about this morning actually, and I remember this quite vividly when I was in high school. And I remember I used to be, I think it was my year 10 or 11 or something like that. And I remember, I was kind of just chilling in high school, and I was thinking to myself, okay, currently I'm doing maths A. I'm doing all the real soft subjects because I was lazy. I was like, yeah, fucking, I just want to get through. And I remember thinking, okay, well, let's challenge myself and go from maths A to maths B without really thinking about the time in terms of the month. So I think we were like mid-semester, and I remember I was requesting to change during mid-semester, and it was probably one of the worst times to actually do it because
You're like, I'm Albert Einstein.
yeah, because you haven't learnt the first half of the semester's studies. And I remember my teacher saying to me, hey, mate, I'm happy for you to actually change over, but you got to remember that you're halfway through the semester. You've got to really study your ass off. And I remember thinking to myself, fuck yeah, I'm up for the challenge. I'm going to do it. So I did. And my maths B teacher was like, mate, you got to study your ass off, hey? I'm like,
You're
yeah.
fucked.
Yeah, I was like, fuck, okay, yeah, I got it. And I used to go to his tutors because he used to host tutorials every lunchtime, and I sacrificed my lunchtime.
Wow, a teacher actually hosted tutorials at lunch at high
so
school.
it's for extracurricular if you're struggling with certain things in maths. And I remember I used to go because I was like, fuck, I need to learn. And I remember I used to study hard for maths. I used to go to those tutors and shit like that. Long story short, I just failed my exam, and my teacher was like, mate, you did fucking pretty good for someone that came halfway and only just failed given the time frame.
But to reel it back, what was the intentions or what was your goal to move from maths A to B? Like, why did you do that?
I think it was more of a challenge for me because, like I said, I was very mellow with school. So I wanted to challenge myself to really achieve, doing something that's a little bit harder in terms of subject.
But to dig a little deeper, were you doing good in maths A though?
I was doing okay.
You just randomly was like, I'm going to do maths B.
Yeah, I'd say B's or something like that.
But throughout that journey, that whole situation, was there any points where you wanted to give up or you had thoughts of giving up?
So initially, up to when I failed, I was fucking hella determined, and I was like, yeah, okay, I did all these I've like put in the hours, worked my ass off, and then I got to that point where I failed. I was like, okay, am I willing to put so much effort and sacrifice lunch just to sort of catch up to everyone that's already been studying this subject? And I was like, weighing up the differences of should I continue or should I not? And I remember saying, well, fuck, I'm just going to give up because that's the easier option for me. And my mindset and my head space wasn't as strong. So I was like, okay, the easiest option is to stop.
Okay, so after you gave up, how did you feel though? Not saying like immediately. So after you gave up, say time went on and maybe you met up with other friends who kept doing maths B and all that kind of stuff. What did you feel?
I think I felt two parts, a side of relief that I fucking stopped. But the other side was more like, damn, I could have kept going and at least challenged myself. To see for a personal development from my perspective, that is, to grow. But obviously I didn't continue. So I took the easiest option there, and that was to stop.
Yeah. And I think it's also realizing how much you actually wanted that. Like if you actually really wanted to challenge yourself, or if you actually really wanted to prove to yourself, not to other people, that you can do Maths B or you can do better or you can take on a challenging class, I think that would have been a good way to help motivate you to keep pushing through too.
Yeah,
and because you were saying like you just did it just cause, like, yeah, you did want to challenge yourself, but really the reason was like, it's a just cause and I wanted to try it. So it wasn't like a real big driver. It was just like, oh, if it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, then let's just go back to Maths A. That's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, and it was a challenge for me at the time. But when I reflect back, I definitely think that I had distractions because I wanted to hang out with my friends during lunch, and I didn't want to sacrifice my lunchtime just to study and catch up to people. So I was like,
To
fuck that.
steal tuck shop food.
Yeah, to hustle food and sell it. But anyway,
Side story.
yeah. So I just didn't want to give up that luxury at the time. Another thing is discipline too. If I continue, then I would have been successful maybe in Maths B.
Yeah, nice.
Do you have any stories that's similar to this?
Well, I wanted to first start off by saying, because when I was thinking about this question, like, were there moments where you thought of giving up? And I don't know why I only just realized this now when this question came up, which I guess is the beauty of these conversations. And I realized I'm actually a person who doesn't think about giving up, or I don't give up easily. So if I am on a mission or someone gave me a task or I need to do something, my goal is just like I need to do it from start to finish. And it's like, how do I get there? So to give up, it's actually really hard, or it doesn't actually cross my mind, which to an outsider, it may sound like a good thing, but I think there's also a lot of problems with thinking like that, because like that comes across with like boundaries or knowing yourself or realizing the real priorities or your main focus, and does it align with that? And sometimes that gets clouded. And I don't think it's because I'm fearing of failure or whatever it is. It's just that maybe it's like a tunnel vision. I'm like, this is my goal. I need to get here. And it's just like, how do I get there? And that's all I think about. And I also think about like all the effort that I need to put into it, because if I am to do something, I'm putting my 150% into whatever it is, everything that I do in life. That's just how I do things. So giving up isn't really much of an option unless I'm really like depressed or like it's really getting me down. Then I'm like, okay, really, I should probably stop doing this. So I think that's one of my problems. But in terms of thinking of giving up, I think is a really good example is a recent Muay Thai fight that I had. And it's not about the fight itself. It's like you actually don't realize how much mental strength you need to have to step into that ring and to be like punched up constantly, punched and kicked, and to punch back and all that. And to go through that, it's less of the, like, there is obviously the technique part and you going training and applying all the stuff that you've trained. But then there's also that part where it's like you're in the ring, 3 rounds, 2 minutes for me, and you have to go through that each round and just constantly being punched. There was a glimpse of one moment where I just kept getting punched like nonstop, and I was like, do I just stop? But then that was only a really quick moment where I was like, okay, no, I can't think about that. Like, I can't give up. I've trained so hard. I need to keep going. I need to keep pushing. And also, if I stop, it's like I've trained so hard to come this far to not push through, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So that is one moment where there was a glimpse of like, should I give up? But then it was a quick like, no, I need to keep pushing. I need to keep persisting. The reason why I was showing this example is because if there's ever chances where I'm like, maybe I should give up, this is my thought process. It's like, it's a glimpse and then it just goes away. I'm like, no, I need to keep going. So that was a good example.
I can relate to that too. I haven't exactly done a fight specifically, but I've done like a mock fight where you're up in the ring, and I know how it actually feels, because especially if you're fresh or you're doing an amateur first fight, it's all foreign to you. And it, like you said, that mental capacity, the whole physical aspect, and then thinking, being able to logically think and strategically think while you're under stress is actually really, really hard. And like you said, the mentality of that aspect has to be so strong, because that's what's forcing you to continue.
Also, this is another good example. That Muay Thai fight is the example of I never self-doubted myself. I trained so hard. I believed in myself going into the fight. It's not about not believing myself in the end and all that, but it's like I can definitely feel my confidence going down as I'm in that ring, like fighting, and you're like, okay, maybe I didn't make the right choice. Maybe I'm not as good as I thought, or maybe I can't actually do this. And that's my thought, where it's an example of I started with confidence and it slowly dropped over time.
Yeah. It's like your stamina bar, it slowly drains as you progress through the fight. But it's not just that, your body too. Your body just doesn't react to what your brain thinks.
Well, it's also you get tired because
Yeah.
there's a really intense fight. So they say that your 1 hour of training in the gym with the pads and the kicking, as opposed to that one round that you're giving it 150%, it's like doesn't come close to your 1 hour of training
Yeah.
in the gym.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one example, and the learning experience that came out of it. Like the outcome was good because I persisted, and just to hear that people were like, I didn't win the fight, but people were like, wow, you did great. You like held on, you didn't give up, and like you smiled at the end of each round. Like those are just good things and good learning outcomes where it's like it shows that even if you didn't win, there are other things that you've learned from it and other things that you've actually won from. Like, so you won your own self-growth, your own experience. Like there's other wins that came out of it.
Something that I find that kind of relates to this, when I was actually doing a powerlifting training program and competition, the hardest thing that I struggled with was the diet and the actual training. And the training was pretty, like I wouldn't say it's intense, like I wouldn't compare it to Muay Thai. The intensity of like weight training it's quite taxing to your nervous system as well as your physical capabilities. And the diet was insane. Like I remember I had to eat so much more than what I could. And I remember forcing myself to eat because I needed the energy. And I remember thinking in my mind, like, fuck, why am I putting myself through this shit where I'm eating so much carb and protein? I'm like fucking not even shitting properly because I'm eating so much carbs and stuff like that. And I remember thinking like, far out, man, is this what I need to do to compete or lift at a certain level or perform at a certain level? I've got a 12-week cycle and having to count down the weeks of training just so I could tick that box saying, I fucking survived this week. And I guess the biggest thing that I really appreciated was the people that around me who were doing the same thing were doing this every single day for many, many years. And I guess that the discipline that they had to have was crazy. And for them to be okay with it and all good about it, here I am thinking I'm going through this right now and I'm thinking, shit, is this really worth like doing?
Mm.
It was quite I guess a challenge at the time.
That also goes back into like how much are you willing to do this and how much did you want this, like to gain strength or to do the comp and all that as well. It's like a really big question. I think that gym is a really good example because a lot of these things where you're choosing whether to give up or not, it's really you need to learn about yourself. You really need to learn about how far you can push yourself and how far you can push yourself until it's unhealthy. And it's the same like if I was to, because I also do lifting, and it's the biggest thing that also added to my experience in mental strength is lifting, because when you're doing the lift and you're going for a PB, so your personal best, there are some bad days where you're lifting your heaviest, you're getting onto that higher weight and you're lifting, and as you're doing it, you're like, no, I can't do it. And if you really think that, you honestly can't do it. But then there are days where I go in, I'm confident, I lift exactly the same weight, the one that I didn't believe in myself for. And I think to myself, I'm like, nah, I can do this, I can pull through this. And I may struggle, like in the middle of the lift, you pause for a little bit, but then you keep thinking to yourself, you're like, nah, I can do it. And you realize you're like, wow, you can actually recognize how much your self-talk and the voices in your head can influence what you can or can't do. And this is actually proven through my own lifting and other things that I've done as well.
That is very true. It's all that mental headspace that sort of pushes you to the next level. Obviously, albeit that, yes, your body is another factor to it as well.
Yeah,
but
there's like so many other influences. That's why I'm saying you need to understand yourself, because if you actually are genuinely really tired that day, you need to understand and count that into the factor. But if say your energy levels are the same on both those days, but the difference is just your mindset, that is the difference.
it can kill the vibe.
Make or break.
Yeah.
Going back to another example of I'm a person that doesn't give up, I think a really big example is friendships. I'm not saying all friendships, but I've had friendships where it's like it's grown, I've outgrown it, but I'm holding on. I guess I have that also, like that loyalty mentality. This one's like coming from loyalty and not wanting to give up and then ruining a friendship or making it look bad or whatever. But then say I've outgrown a friendship, I still hold on to it and say they may not take much notice of me or they don't reach out to me, but in my head I'm like, no, they're still friends with me. Like I'm still friends with them. But it to a point it's like how much do you hold on to this friendship until you're like, okay, they don't actually value you as a friend. And never once have I been like, I'm just going to give up. I'm not going to do anything with it. So I think friendships and relationships has been a big one for me where this is a clear example where I should give up, especially when they don't value me the same way, but I still hold on to it.
Yeah. Relationships is one of those big questions that
It's a hard one.
it's a hard one, yeah. And I relate to that as well because I went through similar things in the past where it's something that you figure out over time. And I remember making that decision between, oh, should I bother continuing the relationship or should I consider giving up on this because it's not worth my time and effort?
Outside of like your time and effort, do you feel like you're also giving up all the years that you've invested into that relationship as well?
That's a question as well that you've got. I mean, I can remember considering that as well. It's like, oh shit, if I'm giving up on this, is that really, really worth giving up the time and the relationship built, the experiences, the joy, and everything like that?
This one I brought up as an example because I think it's a really good example for one where it's like not one where you fully 100% give up. It's more like you kind of park it there on the side, especially for friendships that's like it's not bad, but it's like they're just not aligned with where you are now or you guys aren't aligned. So you kind of like park it to the side, but you don't completely give up. So they're like still there.
Yeah, this relates to past love relationships as well. And for me, I remember thinking, whenever I got into a sticky situation with my exes or whatever, I always thought, oh, fuck, is it really worth continuing with this fucking girl? Is it really worth me actually trying and pursuing and pushing through? Getting to the end of it is more so, is it really worth that effort?
So what was the defining answers that made or break the situation? That push you through and be like, okay, let's end this, or okay, let's keep pushing through?
I think I'm a kind of guy that likes to give people chances. So I'm always like, okay, well, just depending on what the situation is or why we even had a disagreement, is it really mature and like a feasible reaction for me to
is it
feel this way?
logical?
Is it logical in terms of how I'm feeling? And I'm always a person that's very much like, oh, I need to consider the other person and think about what that perspective is before I make my decision. Yes, maybe there has been some decisions where I was a little bit irrational and close them off, which if you guys have listened to a previous episode that we had in regards to regrets, that's when I spoke about relationships in there, if you want to know.
Many good ones there. Check it out.
So yeah, those moments is where I probably shouldn't have done that or wasn't confident enough to think about it enough or deeper or just logically.
I have one last example. This one's a quick one, but a really big example of, again, me holding out and not giving up when I should have. So very early on in one of the apps, I talked about having facial experiences because my face started breaking out, which I still do, haven't fixed it, still on that journey to fix it. If anyone has any facial tips, hit me up. But this is like one of the first times I've actually properly gone into the facial. I was trying to just improve the breakouts on my face before our wedding. So one of the suppliers recommended me to this facial lady, and she was telling me that she was giving me extraction. So this is when they extract like oils and like pimples and whatever out of your face. And I was lying there for a good 3 hours of her extracting my face. And when I say 3 hours, it's not an exaggeration. It was actually 3 hours. And it was really painful. And because it was my first experience, didn't know what to expect, which was one of the reasons why people would usually give up. They didn't know what to expect when they get into it. But me being me, didn't give up. And I was thinking, okay, maybe this is normal. Okay, maybe this extraction will really help my face. So I was just really, again, set on that goal, set on that end, reaching to the end and the results. Just literally sat through the 3 hours of her gouging at my face. And then when I got home, she didn't actually tell me that my face was all bleeding. I looked in the mirror and saw my face and I was like, what the hell? Imagine an explosion and glass just blew up all over your face, cut every single centimeter off your face, and that's what it looked like. Yeah, I don't know how I sat through 3 hours of that and thought that was normal.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked up. Yeah.
So that's another example of I'm the other end of the spectrum where I probably should have given up earlier rather than sitting through it. Sometimes persistence isn't always the best thing.
I wonder if you still have you have a photo of that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, you should chuck up a photo because it looks pretty fucked.
Yeah, and it took, I think, a whole month and a half to heal, and I still have scars from it. I even asked my cousin who's in the beauty industry, and she's like, it shouldn't be like that. Like, sometimes you get 1 or 2 scabs, but definitely not a whole face full of it. So, don't know what happened.
Do your research, guys, when you're going out to do that stuff.
She's actually not listed on Google, and she's nowhere to be found. So, maybe I entered some black market facial
You
thing.
probably
I
did,
don't know.
buddy. You probably did.
Yeah. Anyways, that's an example of persistence isn't always the key.
Well, I think you have a very strong mental resilience in that regard.
I actually think I have a problem. I just persist too much.
Yeah.
What about you? Any other stories?
Actually, I thought about this and I thought, let's bring out good old Reddit.
And see what other people had.
This guy put up a question of what can you do about giving up too easily / quickly with most things in life?
Right, so that was a thread?
That's a question.
Ah.
And there was one answer in particular that I actually really liked. And I thought basically applies to everything in life in general. Depends on how you read it or interpret it. But his answer is...
Depends on how you read it.
You read it, yes.
You know? Pun intended.
Anyway, the answer is it really depends on what you're giving up on and why. For an example, if you give up on running a marathon but never trained to a run marathon, quitting is a smart move. If you drop a calculus class that got too difficult, it's a smart move not to fail. Just sign up for the next semester and get better at learning the essential skills you need. If it's a relationship, maybe the relationship needed to be given up. Most early ones are only practice anyways. What I'm trying to really say is that sometimes giving up makes damn good sense. People stick with the wrong jobs, the wrong professions, and the wrong relationships just because they don't want to quit. They make it a disaster worse.
He's talking about me.
But it's only your fear of failure making you run away. There's another option going on. Fear of failure and fear of letting go are the heads and tails of the same ugly coin. So what he's really saying is fucking true. It relates.
I'm just trying to think how that relates to me, because I know for definite that the reason why I don't give up isn't a fear of failure, but maybe it's the fear of letting go. It's the same thing. Like, I've had a few careers where I've stuck with it for too long, and I definitely know it doesn't align with me, and I always think, like, why am I holding on? And maybe it is that fear of letting go.
Yeah.
That guy makes some really good points.
And I think the big point that I really like what he said about was the relationship thing. He was saying that some relationships you've just got to let go. And a lot of the early relationships are just practice, because you got to practice getting to know yourself, getting to know what you like, what you want in a relationship for you to perfect it, or know what you need that suits you. So that really resonated with me.
Yeah, no, that's really good. But from that, how do we train our mental resilience?
Well, that's actually a good question for you, buddy, because like I said,
I've trained it, man. I'm the ultimate.
yeah, you got the hectic mental resilience there, buddy, for 3 hours getting jabbed in the face.
Yeah, think of the end result. That's all I ever think about, how to get from A to B. In all seriousness, this is a very vague one, a very broad one, but sometimes if you are really dedicated to this result, very dedicated to your end goal and working towards it, you just have to sit through the motions. So the motions could be high, could be low, could be like mellow, whatever it is, but you have to understand that there will be high points, there will be low points, and you just have to go through it to reach to your end goal. And that is exactly what I did with my facial. I sat through the motions of pain.
But what she didn't do was weigh out the positives. Okay, you need to weigh out the positives and then focus on the positives.
What do you mean? The positives was to get a beautiful face.
Well, he left scars in your face, buddy.
Yeah. These battle scars.
Fucking Guy Sebastian, mate.
Yeah.
So, like I said, see the positives, but I would say weigh out the positives first, because obviously if there is a lot more negatives or cons to the positives, then maybe you should reevaluate. But the purpose is to focus on the positives to keep you on track, set in mind to obviously achieve what your goal is.
And I think also challenges come with taking on opportunities and tasks and just growing yourself in general. So, along with going through the motions, just take notes of all the small things that happen and be grateful for it and appreciate what's happening and literally find the good in the small things. So, if you're working your way up your career, it's hard, but maybe you found a lot of friends in that job that you're in right now, and you can appreciate all the peers that you have next to you. The job itself might be hard, but you have found a lot of friends who are in a similar industry who can relate to you, who can share the knowledge and the pains.
Yeah. And try not to focus on the negative talk. I understand that, it is only natural for us to think negatively. We've got to really try to slap ourselves in the face to keep us focused on what that goal is. If it's to get from A to B, then focus on getting to B without any negativity.
Well, I wouldn't say don't have any negative. So bringing it back to that Muay Thai example or those examples where we're lifting, you might have that glimpse of a thought. But like I've said many times, thoughts are just thoughts. Sometimes they're really just there. It's just like these clouds that are hanging around, but they don't actually mean anything. So understand that, like, is this really a thought that I want to entertain, or is it just a thought that's coming and passing? And for me, a lot of those times when I'm like, yeah, maybe I should give up, maybe I didn't make the right choice, I let that come, I let that go, and then reset and be like, no, my main focus is to get here, so I need to keep persisting. And that's how I train my mental resilience.
Yeah, I can just imagine like a little speech bubble pop up. Don't be a bitch.
Yeah, it's like the angel and the devil sitting
Yeah.
on your shoulders and they're just talking to you. It's a bit like that. It's just like, do you want to entertain it? If you entertain it, like that lifting situation, on those days where you're like, nah, I really can't do it, and you keep entertaining it, you will end up not doing
Yeah.
that lift.
Yeah.
Another one, it sounds really counterintuitive, but don't withdraw in tough times. This really goes down to understanding yourself. There's times where people like when it really just doesn't feel right, it's really out of your comfort zone. You don't think this is working out. But sometimes you really just have to stick through the tough times, because I saw this quote, I really can't remember what it said, but it's like your challenges will feel the most challenging when you're almost at the end. So it's like you've built up all this momentum, you've done all the work, you've done all the research, whatever, but you're almost at that end goal. That's when you feel the most challenging times and the most difficult. And a lot of people will end up giving up there. And this has actually worked for me. And I've done it many times through different occasions where I end up pushing through. I'm like, wow, it was really just that last push where I really needed to just finish, and then I got to the end goal. And it's similar to you riding a bike up that hill, like a really steep hill. The first maybe third of the hill is okay, like it's a bit tough, but you just ride. But then once you almost get to the peak of that mountain, that peak of that hill, it gets so tough where like you're probably thinking to yourself like, this is way too hard. I can't even get that extra last push over to the hill. And that's when people stop, get off their bike. But if you just keep persisting, go over that hill, once you've passed that peak, it's easy downhill and cruise. So I think that's a really good analogy to think about when you're going through tough times. And I'm relating this again to points where you really want to reach a certain goal. You really want to get to a certain point. This is when you would use this where you're at a tough point, but you just have to keep persisting.
Yeah. I don't know why I randomly thought this, but it reminds me of the time when I was studying marketing and I was on my last semester and I decided to quit. Stupid decision ever, but I remember that moment where I was like, yeah, this is something that I don't want to do, even though I did 95% of it, and just decided to close it off.
Yeah. If you really think back and reflect, a lot of people can relate to that. And it's not blaming and saying that it's a bad thing to do, but it's just realizing that you just need to stick through it for just that little bit longer, and you will be so surprised how far you can actually push yourself.
Yeah. And speaking of failures, failures are also a great opportunity for learning too. So don't think of it as a pure negative outcome. We all fail at some point in our lives, and it's a lesson for all of us to learn and actually recalibrate from what we actually did wrong to try something differently, to strategize in a different way.
Mm.
So those are opportunities for all of us.
Yeah, it's not failure, it's lessons. And also, when you fail or when things don't work out, you're not starting from scratch, you're not starting from nothing, you're starting from experience. Because no matter what happens, whether you achieved it, you didn't achieve it, you've still learned something from that experience.
Yeah.
Just to sum up everything, if you were to give some points either to your younger self or to other people who may be going through something challenging and considering whether they should give up or not give up, what are your rounded up top tips?
Damn. Okay. Well, I think the first thing is if you are at a point where you're deciding, hey, is this something that I want to continue, or if it's something that is just too fucking hard and I'm just at a sticking point, reflect on what you have achieved so far, how far are you into it, and realizing what your true goal is. What's your focus? Why are you doing this in the first place?
I want to add to that point. It's like, yeah, realizing your true goal. So, say you started on this task, you had this initial goal. Your goal can change, it can move, your goalpost can move to a different point. And reflection, like you said, is great because it helps you think, am I still working towards that goal or has my goal changed? And then say you were thinking of giving up, are you okay with yourself giving up at this point? If you're happy with where you've got to now and all the things that you've learnt, then maybe it's okay that you gave up. But if you're like, nope, my goal is still the same, I still want to get to where I get to, and if I give up now, I might be disappointed in myself, then maybe you need to keep persisting.
Yeah. The second one I like to add to that is the failure. I think that's a big one. And I find that a lot of people overlook that. Failing is not a negative thing, it's a learning. You know, we all make errors in our life. We may fail in certain things, and that is a part of learning. That is a part of life. You mentioned this before, it's an experience. It's an experience where, yes, you failed, but it's not that you're starting again. You're going back in it with knowledge and experience.
Yeah, I was looking through a whole bunch of old photos at a conference that I went to, and this guy that talked, I think it was Adam something, forgot what it was. I'll put up the post. But I shared this quote, I think a month ago, and he said, failure is just research unless you actually give up. That's a really good way of seeing it because it really is research. Like if you think of people in the labs, they're constantly trialing and error. They have hypothesis, they test it out, it might fail. But when they fail, that adds research and answers to what you're trying to find out.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty powerful one.
Yeah. And then the last one, I want to share my perspective because I know that a lot of talk usually about giving up is like persisting and challenging yourself and pushing through. But coming from my perspective as someone who doesn't usually think about giving up is understanding yourself and knowing when to give up because persistence, like I said, isn't always the key. And sometimes when you persist, it may end up you just digging too deep of a hole into the wrong path and you really just needed to stop. So don't think that you always need to persist and you always need to push through because if it really doesn't align with you, if you feel like your intuition, your gut feeling is actually like, this is not right, you really need to stop. So it's understanding that. I know that's counterintuitive and it goes against everything that we're trying to say, but it's really understanding yourself, understanding your goals, your purpose, alignments with yourself as a person.
Nice.
But one last thing I wanted to add, going back into the failure is just research. Also saw another quote, well, something that people shared. So if you think about babies who are learning to walk, babies who are learning to walk, they fall so many times, but a baby would never give up and say, I'm not going to walk anymore. They will continuously get up and keep walking. So I think that's also a good analogy. It's seeing things as what babies would do. They continue to fall, but they continue to get back up and continue to try, and eventually they end up walking. So it's a beautiful story.
Damn. Well, guys, let us know if there's anything that we missed I know there is quite a fair bit, so maybe we missed a heap.
Yeah. Let us know if you have any stories that you'd like to share where either you persisted through and you had a beautiful outcome, or you actually gave up. And not giving up as a bad thing, but gave up and stopped whatever journey you were on and it ended up being the best choice ever. And share us your stories in our DMs or in the comments on our Instagram.
Nice. Anyway, thank you again, guys, for joining us, and we will see you guys in the next episode.
Bye.
Peace.